Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist in another edition of Sabbath Sunday. I have my Sabbath podcast co-host Darren returning here with us, and we have John McEntee from the band Incantation. He's out on the road and he stopped in for this one, and we are going to be doing an in defense of Black Sabbath's Live Evil album, their first official album. Darren and I did a podcast on this one a couple of episodes ago, and John reached out to me and he said, we got to do an in defense of Live Evil. He's a big fan of this record. So here we are. This is an album. It's the first official live album from Black Sabbath. But the album is sort of shrouded in a bit of cloud of, mystery in some ways and some drama around the record. The unofficial, or shall we say, not band authorized album Live at Last had been released a few years before this. The band felt a little pressured, like they needed to get their own live album out. So they put out Live Evil. Ozzy releases Speak of the Devil right at the same time, an album filled with all Black Sabbath songs on it. So there was that drama there. It would also be the last album for Ronnie James Dio and Vinny Appice till they would come back with The Humanizer. But it was the end of them for this first round in the band. And depending on whose side of the story you listen to, if you listen to Iommi and Geezer, Ronnie was sneaking into the studio and raising his vocals. If you listen to Dio and Vinny, they were just showing up on time and those guys weren't there, so they were just getting stuff done. There's a lot of drugs involved at this point in the band, especially with Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, so I'm sure that puts a hazy cloud over their memories of this time. But it's an interesting album for a lot of people. If you were of the right age, this was your first live Black Sabbath album, so people have feelings about this record. So Darren and I have gone on the record with the podcast about how we feel about this record. So we'll turn the floor over first to John here. And John, tell us why you are a big fan of the Live Evil album. Come to its defense.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's all perspective, and the more I do these episodes, your episodes or the Rock Fantasy Files and stuff, I start to try to bring back the timeline of how things happen and stuff, because it's hazy. I mean, it's a long time ago, so it took a while to really kind of piece where everything kind of fell into place. And after listening to your podcast on Live Evil, it made me realize that when I heard Live Evil, that was the first time I heard Sabbath songs that I thought the vocals sounded good on, because I didn't like any of the early, I didn't like Ozzy's vocals when I first heard them on the first couple albums. I actually borrowed them from a friend when I was pretty young, and I was just like, man, these vocals suck, but I thought the music was really heavy, so I was like, man, I wish I could like this band, but I'm not feeling these vocals. It just, especially on the first album where he has that kind of to his voice. At that time, it was just really irritating to me and stuff. So, and actually, I remember I was actually got the Holy Diver first from Dio, and then from Holy Diver I actually went back to Black Sabbath, which I thought my first Dio experience was Mob Rules, but I'm wrong on that now that I think about it, because I remember getting Holy Diver. I fell in love with that album as a kid, and I said, well, oh shit, this guy played in Black Sabbath, that band I didn't like because I didn't like the vocalist. But if he was the vocalist, if I buy an album that he's doing vocals on, maybe I'll be able to like Black Sabbath now. So I wasn't sure which album to pick up, but I was like, well, if I pick up the live album, it has some songs from all different eras of the band, and maybe I can kind of understand, learn okay, what do I like with this band? What are the things that are good about this band? So I remember picking it up, and I was just blown away. I mean, because I loved Holy Diver, but I was a very inexperienced young kid. I didn't know about anything. I knew I just liked heavy metal. I thought guitar sounded cool, and you know, so but once I heard Live Evil and heard that guitar of Tony Iommi on that album, his tone is like the monster tone. I never heard anything like that in my life when it broke into Neon Nights, and it's just it was just something that was just like, it was a wall. It's a wall of heavy guitars, I think, on that album, and especially looking at it from somebody, if like you were talking about, I love the Holy Diver album, but I see your point when you said that the guitars are a little bit rigid or something. I can't remember the word that you said, but and then if you listen to Live Evil comparing that, it's just like you're listening to like almost like Vinny Appice's Boulders, but like the whole fucking landslide of guitars, and it like opened my eyes up to like, holy crap, like can anything be this heavy? So basically, this album opened up the door for me to convince myself that, okay, this music's really good. I love the vocals on it. I had nothing to really compare it to. I mean, besides the fact that I heard some of those songs before with Ozzy, and I didn't like his vocals at the time, and I didn't know the whole catalog of Sabbath. I knew I've heard the first album and the second album, and yeah, I might have had volume 4, possibly not volume, but I had it, borrowed it from a friend. So I kind of knew, you know, I just knew I didn't like the vocals, but this actually, it was weird, but I played a trick on myself. And I was like, well, let me buy, this other live Sabbath album. I bought was it Live at Last? Was it, or,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I still didn't really like the vocals, but I was like, I love the music so much that, it's like, I just kind of forced myself to accept Ozzy's vocals. And it's funny to look at it now because I think Ozzy's performance on those Sabbath albums are great. But as a kid, I just didn't get it. Like I was able to get Dio because Dio had just, he just had this heaviness, this roughness, this passion. It was like for I would say like a teenager, especially a young teenager, just getting into really heavy music. I was able to relate to that more than the weird. I thought Ozzy just had a weird tone on those albums. I didn't get it. I know people are like jumping through the computer pie wanting to like kill me or whatever, but this is just my perception. So the reason why this album is so important to me is, because this was my first version of hearing these songs. And it's not that, like, the Dio songs are great, are all, to me, they're all great. I agree that Heaven and Hell could be condensed a little bit, maybe, or, I think it's, to me, even though I love Tony Iommi soloing and stuff like that, I much rather would have heard, some other songs on taking that space up instead of just the soloing. And I didn't know Sign of the Southern Cross before that, but I knew it was super cool song. And I was kind of, after hearing Sign of the Southern Cross on Mob Rules, I was bummed out that they didn't play all of Sign of Southern Cross, even though I like the transition that they did. I think it's a cool thing that they did. It's like, man, Sign of Southern Cross is such a good song. Like, this doesn't need to be cut with Heaven and Hell, or at least finish Sign of Southern Cross, then add that ending of Heaven and Hell to it, would have probably been a better thing. But that's like, if you're talking about the 13-year-old me, that was all minutia, it was just like, I'm hearing this, it was like a guitar moment for me, like I'm hearing this guitar player just like, you know, kick ass all over this album with this singer that, I already knew and loved from, hearing the Dio stuff. Now, getting to the Ozzy songs, I know that's the bone of contention was with you guys on the episode. And, but for me, I guess I gave it a lot more slack because that was the version I was hearing that I liked. I liked that version. So I heard those vocals and I thought it was cool. I liked I didn't, well, it's, if I'm putting in perspective, I didn't know the minutia. I didn't know the minutia that was put in there. I didn't know Dio was doing anything super special. I just knew he was doing it good. And it sounded good to me at that time because I didn't like some of those songs that I heard vocal version in the past. So I just like, wow, he came in there and he made these songs sound good. I know it's crazy, but, and like one for me that well, first of all, so we'll say like with NIB and some of the other ones, they're good. They're not, now looking back at it, yeah, they're not as good as Ozzy in its prime doing it. I would still rather hear Dio play those songs live than watch Ozzy play them at the fucking Ozfest for like 10,000 times playing the same songs, and it just kills my soul that they do that because they have so many great songs, and I hate to just see the NIB and the Paranoids and all these songs. They're great songs, but it's like I'm gonna die again. Like you have all this meat and you're just giving me like the scraps here. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day, I guess. But for me, the Black Sabbath, the cover of Black Sabbath, which I remember you guys saying that, you just couldn't get into or deal with. At least Darren, I think, said that. And man, I love that version of Black Sabbath. I think because it brings a whole atmosphere to that song that is, looking back, it's different than Ozzy. And I love Ozzy's version on the first album. I think it's great. I'm not huge on watching Ozzy play that song live. It sounds good, but if I listen to it, I want to listen to Ozzy doing it. I want to hear it on the first album. If I hear Dio do it, I can listen to any version of Dio do it and listen to his nuances. And to me, it's just beautiful. It's just phenomenal to hear him take this, like almost make it into his own little story and tell the tale kind of in his own way. I just love that. But I'm also one that I love the live versions of Ian Gillan singing Black Sabbath. To me, that's like one of the best things I ever heard in my life. Hearing him do those screams in Black Sabbath, it's just like holy crap. It just. But anyway, getting back to this album, probably the worst thing on the album probably is Paranoid. After hearing the original Paranoid, yeah, it's not that good. It's definitely a low point of the album. At the time, I thought it was okay. I just didn't think it was one of the better songs that Sabbath had. And to be fair, I don't think it's one of the better songs that Sabbath has. And if I see Black Sabbath live, especially with Ozzy singing the song, it's like, I know it's just time to walk to my car because I don't need to hear that song played again. And I know you guys were saying that you love the song and you could always, listen to it when it's on. But man, I used to have, was it XM radio and Ozzy's Boneyard? They play that and War Pigs on that like every freaking 10 minutes. And I would have to change the channel. I can't hear fucking that version of War Pigs or Paranoid, even though they're great songs. It's like, man, I have a brain. I can't be regurgitated these songs when there's like 30 other songs that would just like blow my mind to hear from Sabbath. And you're playing these the tripe. You're giving me like scraps. It's annoying, and it's Live Evil probably suffers. Getting back to Live Evil, suffers from having to include the older Sabbath songs on it, because it definitely was way better for me as a Dio fan when I seen Heaven and Hell play, and they just played the Dio era stuff. Not that I didn't like Dio. I like Dio's version, and trust me, my friends, they fucking think it sucks. They hate when I listen to Live Evil and I listen to Black Sabbath and War Pigs and Iron Man on that. But I love those versions. But I was so happy when they did the Heaven and Hell stuff that they played the, Dio era Black Sabbath, because he shines so much in those songs that it just makes for a better experience. And not to be mean about it or sound like an idiot, but it's to me, it's almost below Dio to even sing a song like Paranoid on an album when there's a million other songs you could have sang better, even a better Sabbath song. I know Paranoid is the song that everybody likes, like the people that don't really even follow Sabbath likes, and I get it, you have to do it, but I really do think, for you know to me, it's a useless, it's like when you see that in the set, for me it's just like, ugh, and I mean, honestly, when I've seen Sabbath on those Ozfest tours or other tours, I look through the set and I'd be like, I love Sabbath, but man, I don't know if I need to spend my hard-earned money to see these songs that you know like we're lucky if they throw in one song that is like, cool to see. I mean, I would pay to go see it. I mean, when I seen Sabbath play on Ozfest, I know I'm going a little bit off on a rant, but when I seen Sabbath play at Ozfest, it was the day after, or 2 days after. I can't remember how many days, but it was the show before. It was with Rob Halford singing the Sabbath set. And I was begging that Rob Halford was going to sing the Sabbath set. I was so begging. I was like, can I just be this lucky? Can I just be this lucky to see it? And then Ozzy came out. Of course, everyone's roaring and raging for Ozzy. And I'm there to like, no, please, no. It's like, I don't need to hear fucking the same thing. I mean, it's not like I love those songs, but since Sabbath has gotten back together at a reunion, they really over milk out some of the older stuff, and it overshadows a lot of the. I'm not even talking about the Dio or Tony Martin or whatever. I'm talking about just some of the later stuff. You barely hear. I mean, you might hear Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or a few off that maybe, but you never hear really much other than that, I mean, besides maybe XM radio might play it, but any radio or stuff that people know, they know Paranoid album or Black Sabbath or Masters of Reality, which are great albums, but it's like, to me, there's just such a wealth of amazing material. I know Ozzy can't sing it, so it's a bummer, but I'd almost rather have Ozzy butcher the damn songs and hear the other guys play, Hole in the Sky, or play, I don't know, just All Moving Parts Stand Still, or Rock and Roll Doctor, something, give me a treat, because it's too catered to a extremely novice Black Sabbath crowd. But anyway, I'm totally off subject, but I have my rants or whatever. But as far as Live Evil, I do think that you could tell now, looking back, you could tell some of the points that you made were valid as far as the crowd vibe, and just they screwed it up in the mix for sure. It doesn't sound like a live album. Like Speak of the Devil sounds like a live album. The songs do sound a little sterile just because of the way something in the mix is done. I'm not really sure what it is, but this is my analysis of the album that's negative is more later on, because at the time it was like my favorite thing ever. And one thing is that I didn't know Sabbath songs well enough, so I did actually get Never Say Die, which I just want to bring in because there's a comparison between the two. And Never Say Die, I liked it a lot when it came out. I thought it was a really great, lively album. Definitely more lively than Live Evil, but I liked Live Evil more because I was attracted to the girth of that guitar, and the drums on that just have, like when War Pigs, like you were saying, dun 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 dun. Dun. I mean, it's just like, ah, that's like you just get your head crushed. Like that's what I want to hear with War Pigs, when if I hear that or something. But that's my favorite part, probably the song, is that drum fill at this point in my life. But the Never Say Die was great at the time because I didn't know those songs that well. But I kind of gave it a chance after I got Live Evil. I started to realize that, okay, maybe this Ozzy thing isn't so bad or whatever. And so I knew some of the songs were the same songs on Speak of the Devil, So you kind of like trace back. I would just buy albums that all had kind of similar songs. So I said, okay, maybe I could start liking it. And I liked Speak of the Devil a lot. But once I really got into Sabbath, I hate that album now listening to it, because I can't deal with the fact. I mean, I think that what was the guitar player? I can't think of his name offhand. Brad Gillis. I think he's great. It tortures me that he's playing all these chirps in his solos and not playing the solos even like remotely the same. And I get it, I mean, he was I understand the situation now, but it doesn't take away the fact that you're playing the guitar god master, the most important guitar player, in my opinion, in heavy music. And I understand you might not nail solos exactly because people don't copy the guitars always the same, but they still need to be a little closer. Plus it's just it's crazy because I love all the musicians in the band in the Ozzy Speak of the Devil album, but it sounds like a heavy metal 80s version of classic Black Sabbath. It's like but they're not doing new songs. They're taking old songs and kind of bastardizing them. And I just look at it like, even though I bitch about hearing War Pigs and Paranoid and Children of the Grave, for the trillionth time or whatever, I still, even though I really don't want to hear, I'd rather hear almost any other Sabbath songs besides some of the generics. I really, really don't want to hear Ozzy butcher those songs even more than the original, taking away the little bit that I really appreciate about those songs. I mean, I appreciate a lot about them. That's being a little over brutal, but it's just really, it's just too poppy. But at the time I thought it was good because I didn't know those albums. I didn't even I liked Ozzy's solo stuff, but I didn't like his Sabbath stuff because I didn't think his voice was good. It took me a while, but once you get into those early albums, I know it sounds contradicting, but it all makes sense somehow. When you get into those older albums, you understand his vocal patterns and stuff and the way he's doing it and the darkness that's there, then it all kind of comes together. I know I threw a lot at you, but those are just some of my gripes, I guess. And this is gripes talking about, pretty much my favorite band ever. But because I love them so much, I'm so passionate about it. Yeah. And I just, it's interesting because, Black Sabbath has such a interesting discography that depending on where you're coming from to it, because you can come to it from different places. Like I came to it from Dio, but if you came to it from Ozzy, then you could totally see everything. And like hearing Live Evil from knowing these old albums like the back of your hand to hearing it, like you were saying, I think in another episode, you were saying that it was weird to hear the different inflections of Dio, but when you're listening to it slightly, it wasn't like a year or so backwards from Holy Diver, or maybe even the same year, I can't remember, but hearing it backwards, you don't notice those inflections. You get so used to hearing it that way that, you know, you say, even if you like the old way, you still like the new way, because I mean, the old way, and I'm saying the old way as the Ozzy way, but I still like the Dio way because that was the way that I first heard it. And, you know, now I look at it, they both kind of have their own charm about it. But like I said, any day of the week, I'll take Dio singing any of the Ozzy Sabbath songs live, especially in the last, what, 20 years or something like that. I mean, it just, even when Ozzy sounds good, it just he's not singing anything that is stimulating my brain at all. It's like I almost feel like a, you know, it's like they want me to be a robot, like Iron Man, Iron Man, Iron Man, you know, and it's like, yeah, Iron Man's a great song, but it's like, holy crap, since I was like a teenage kid, I've been bashed through the head saying Iron Man is like the best heavy metal song or the best Black Sabbath song. And it's like, it's a good song, but holy crap, listen to the band. It's like, there's like so many good songs, but I'll relax for a moment. I'm sorry.
One of the things, first of all, I've been wanting to say the entire time you were talking that I'm envious.
I know, right?
I'm envious of you in the way that you love Live Evil. I wish, and I mean it sincerely, I wish that I had that same sort of passion towards the album, because I really want to like it more than I do. But there's things that interfere with that. And a lot of it you mentioned too. It's when you come on board. It's when you jump on that affects what era you're more partial to. And so with me, it's Ozzy. And so then to hear Dio sing the Ozzy songs, there's a conflict with me with that. But I totally get what you're saying. In fact, I even mentioned it in the podcast. I said, you know, after I expressed that I thought they were a fail from my perspective, but I understood because I was reading online and Facebook or some social media, most likely Facebook, somebody said there was a discussion about Live Evil, and a lot of people were, I think it was actually on the Black Sabbath Facebook page. There's a lot of interesting arguments there. It's hard to control not chiming in, but I know that I'll be there for hours if I even initiate any of that. But
Yeah.
somebody was saying something about the general consensus with all the comments was that no one liked the way that Dio sang the Ozzy stuff. And then one guy said, well, the first time I heard, I prefer the Dio version of Paranoid because the first time I heard Paranoid was on Live Evil and I liked it. And then I heard the Ozzy version and I didn't like it as much. I'm like, yeah, it makes total sense. I get that. But I never even thought of it from that perspective because I'm like, well, who hasn't heard Paranoid before Dio sang it? Well, anybody that was born after a certain year, you know, and it's a really
It wasn't played on radio when I was a kid. When I would listen to radio from 75 to 81 or 82, when I would listen to rock radio, you didn't hear a Sabbath song for miles. There wasn't not even like a throwback, nothing. They didn't give you a bone.
The first time I heard Paranoid was actually, I didn't hear it on the radio, them playing the entire song. I heard it on a radio spot for Ozzy on the Blizzard of Oz tour. It was, and I only heard a few seconds of it, but I'm like, wow, that's great. Because my prior experience was, like I talked about it on the Never Say Die. I walked in the record store, there was a poster for Never Say Die. I thought it looked cool. I wanted to get away from just listening to Kiss all the time. My friends in the neighborhood were starting to turn me on to Alice Cooper, Ted Nugent, Uriah Heep, Van Halen, things like that. So I saw Black Sabbath. I wanted that to be my band. Got the album, took it home. I liked Ozzy's voice, but the music at the time for me was a little bit too sophisticated. But when I heard the slapback vocal, more that grinding riff and Paranoid, I was all about it. So that's my favorite Black Sabbath song.
I got one quick question I wanted to ask you about that.
As many times as that song's been played, And you know what? I mean, if I hear it on the radio, or if I'm listening to the XM in the car or something like that, or even if I have it on my iPod on shuffle and it comes on, I'm not going to listen to it every single time because I've heard it so many times. Sometimes I'm in the mood for it. Other times I'm like, I'm good. You know, same thing with War Pigs, NIB, Black Sabbath. You know, if I'm in the mood for it, cool. If I'm not, I'm going to fast forward it or go on to the next song. But you know, there's a whole thing about when you came into Sabbath, what you heard first makes the biggest impression. And moving forward, that's always going to be your go-to. So I totally get where you're coming from with Live Evil. As far as Speak of the Devil, a lot of what makes that a successful or more successful live album isn't so much who's singing the material. It's the way that, and I think we referenced this in the podcast, when in the 80s, when you got an album and it was a live album and it was a gatefold and you opened it up and there were pictures of the band, or maybe you had some inner sleeves and you could take that out and look at the pictures or read the lyrics or read the liner notes. And the more stuff that there was in the content, the better. And then if you could put that album on and you had an atmosphere where you could hear the audience, or you can just hear a vibe that made you feel like you were at that show. You turn the lights off, or you get in whatever state of mind you need to be in order to enjoy it to the fullest extent. But if you could get into that place in your mind where you were actually at the concert, that I think is a successful live album. It's unfortunate that Live Evil doesn't have that same, at least for me, that same effect. I feel like there's a distance between the band and the audience that takes away from the atmosphere that I think is really important when a band's putting out a live album. It lacks that, and that's really probably the biggest thing. It isn't so much Dio singing the Ozzy songs. I prefer the Ozzy versions of Paranoid, of Black Sabbath, of War Pigs, but I'm totally cool with Children of the Grave, NIB. So I mean, they're not all. I don't have a problem with all of the way that Dio sings the Ozzy stuff. But the biggest thing for me, the biggest obstacle I have with Live Evil, is the it doesn't succeed as a live album as much as its competitor, which was at the time Speak of the Devil. And you can't help but put those albums side by side. They're the same songs, more or less. They came out a month apart. You had the former lead singer from Black Sabbath putting out a spite record, which is essentially what it was. And then you got to feel bad for Sabbath, because it's like, well, wait a minute, we're Black Sabbath and these are our songs, and we're trying to put out a live album. You put yours out a month before and you did all the songs. Come on. Nevertheless,
it's a really
there it is.
lame
And
thing
that's
to
history.
do.
And that's what made the 80s so interesting, is that, you know, bands are, and especially these two bands, or, you know, Ozzy and Sabbath, were feuding so publicly in the press. I mean, every magazine for probably from like 1982 to 83, 81 to 83. I mean, there's always something about Black Sabbath and throwing jabs at Ozzy, and Ozzy throwing jabs back at Black Sabbath. I mean, it was drama. It's like a soap opera. So, and then to have these albums, these two live albums, come out a month apart, I mean, it was just added fuel to the fire. But yeah, for me, one versus the other, I think where Speak of the Devil had the edge was in the fact that it sounded like when you were listening to it, like you were at the show. Then you get into Iommi, and you know, it's like it's kind of frustrating from a fan of the Ozzy era to hear both these things on one on each hand. It's like, man, why can't I make like a Reese's peanut butter cup and take Ozzy's vocals and put it on Live Evil with Tony's guitar? That would be so awesome. But it wasn't how things were at the time. But Speak of the Devil was missing that guitar tone. You're right. I mean, Brad Gillis did a great job, considering he had this project thrown at him like 3 days in advance to learn the songs. I think he handles like a champ. I mean, I you know, that's
he did great.
Total pro right there. But you're right. From a fan standpoint, it's like he's not playing them right. I mean, he is in a way, because you recognize it, but when you listen, it's like, it's just not quite right.
They're shells of the song. They got the basic vibe, and then just kind of went with it. It's not. It's I mean it's he knew the parts, but it's
Yeah,
just not. To
I,
me,
I,
it's like a
I think
medley of the song. I don't know how you'd want to put it. Like it's a, a
I think
different take.
for the situation that was thrown at him, I think he did a great job. But
Yes.
it comes down to basically, what do you when you think of Black Sabbath, what do you take away from that? Do you take away the guitar tone,
That's
or
what
do
I
you
was
take
thinking
away the
too.
vocals? What because they're two very big parts of that band. And
Well,
now,
it's funny because I'm a guitar player, so I'm worried about the guitar playing on Speak of the Devil. When I hear Live Evil, I'm like, okay, there's my man, you know? And
yeah,
it's like, no offense to Brad Gillis. I think Brad Gillis is a great guitar player, and I applaud what he did, you know, in such short notice. But listening, as a Tony Iommi, worshiper, I guess you would say, it's like, no, 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 don't do that. Don't, it's like, just don't touch the songs if you can't play them. At least it doesn't have to be exact, but you gotta at least, like, you gotta get some of those leads at least
yeah.
close. At
Black
least the structure, the shell, something, not just a bunch of little chirpy things going on throughout the songs. I mean,
yeah.
it was killing me hearing those little on a guitar. It's like, come on, okay, the trick's done. Move on.
Brad Gillis wasn't really a fan of Black Sabbath either, and I don't know that Ozzy was really, when he would audition musicians. I don't know that that was part of the criteria, that they had to be Black Sabbath fans. I know Randy didn't like Black Sabbath at all. In fact,
Oh,
when John, as you know, when somebody asked him about Black Sabbath, he's like, either said, "I prefer not to answer that," or "next question," or something like that. He didn't even want to get into his opinion of Black Sabbath. So Randy wasn't a Black Sabbath fan, and Brad Gillis wasn't really that familiar with them. I mean, I think he had not so much of a dislike for them, but he just wasn't
yeah.
a big
Sharon was just
fan.
pushing Ozzy to do it for her own agenda, and got a band together to do this. And it was more out of spite than it was out of putting out a quality live album that is authentic to, the Sabbath songs. Maybe she wanted to take those songs and make them Ozzy
Yeah,
friendly songs. I don't know, but it wasn't done because she was like, yeah, I love, I want to do a Sabbath album, a tribute to Sabbath, and we love
yeah,
Sabbath. No, it's like taking the songs and being like, I want to make these Ozzy songs.
yeah. And that's one of the things that when you're younger, you don't realize some of the stuff
Yeah.
that's going on. When we were younger, we didn't realize that what happened to Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake at the time in 1982. It didn't bother us. We weren't aware of the fact that, I think I was, but it didn't bother me because I wasn't really focused on the things that we get so involved with as adults, and also as people who are constantly subjected to the media, everything. You know everything about the bands, what they're fighting about. Who's who's doing
I
what. I
know.
mean, all of it's out there. And back then in the 80s, we didn't know a lot about that. We didn't need to know about it. We either liked the music or we didn't, and we moved on if we didn't. But it was
Yeah.
strange because I knew that Lee Kerslake and Bob Daisley played on the album. They're credited, but inside there's these other guys, and I'm like, okay, well, hey man, that's the album. I mean, that we just accepted it. But then as you get older and you start to realize that there's some bad things going on, and it actually it's disrespectful to the fans, because the decisions that Sharon made a lot of times, in particular, to re-record Bob and Lee's parts and put that out,
Yeah.
and that was very disrespectful to fans. Some of the things, they fly under the radar, or you may think, well, it
It's too
doesn't,
far.
it
Yeah.
doesn't really bother me
She
too much.
exposed herself.
That's a business thing. That's on them. But when it comes into a situation where it affects the fans, when you're taking something that's like holy, the album Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, which are
Yeah.
just so important. They've been so important in my life. And
Yeah,
then
I agree.
take these things about it, take them out and replace them with something else, man. I mean, and that's the biggest problem. And there's a lot of things to dislike about Sharon, but that's one that hits my core. And the thing I have the biggest problem with, that she did that, not just to the musicians, that's bad enough, but she did it to
I
all the
know.
fans, and that's when things get, you start to take it personally. And so when she did that with Speak of the Devil, it wasn't, even though we enjoy the album, I still do enjoy the album. But if I tend not to think about the reason why it was put into play. But there was a thing where the rights, I think, were coming up to be renewed. And if it was like somebody fumbled the ball and both teams were trying to jump on it to save, to lay ownership or to lay claim of the ball, and the ball being the music in this case. So, and then they both could take possession of it. But it was important that Ozzy also took possession of it, that he recorded these songs, that now he had the catalog in his possession. Black Sabbath, of course, it was time for them to do an album. They now had the songs in their possession as well. But yeah, it was a strange dynamic. It was strange that we had this sort of situation going on at that time. But I mean, as a Black Sabbath fan and as an Ozzy fan, for me, I mean, it was pretty cool. But looking back on it, you were either on one side or you were on the other. Very few people at that point were like just walking down the line like, oh yeah, man, I love the way Dio sings Paranoid, and I like the way Ozzy sings it too. Said no one ever at that particular point in time. As it has aged, as people have grown up with it, um, the story's changed, and that's cool. And when you say things, it's you say it in a way that I think you're almost like challenging me to be offended. And man, I think it's great. I would rather hear, and I mean this with all my heart, I would rather hear somebody extol the virtues of something from the Tony Martin era or the Dio era than go on and on and on about how they only like the first 6 Black Sabbath albums. I hate that.
Well,
And
I
that
hate that
point,
too.
in one of the first podcasts, we mentioned that's like such an annoying thing. Oh, it was only the first thing. You can only trust yourself in the first 6 Black Sabbath albums. I mean, that is like such an
That's how you know they're a
unfan
poser.
thing to say. If you're a true Sabbath fan, you like it. If you don't, then there's probably a pretty good reason why you don't. But if you're a true Sabbath fan, you want to appreciate every era, because Tony Iommi is he is the driving force. He's that guitar sound. He is Black Sabbath basically. And so as a true Black Sabbath fan, I like it when people talk about how much they love the Tony Martin era. I think it's great. I don't want to hear somebody go on and on about, oh, Volume 4 is the best Black Sabbath album ever. Maybe. Based on what? What's your criteria? Musicianship? What? I mean, why is it the best? It's your favorite? Okay, cool. Is it the best? No. I mean, there's a lot of competition from various eras. There's a lot of great music across the board. So no, I mean, I think it's great what you said. I totally appreciate that. I appreciate that. You like Live Evil, and like I started out saying, man, I'm envious. I wish I could like it that much. It's like when we talk about Bark at the Moon, we got into that. We were like ranking Ozzy songs or something, and John and our guest Nick were talking about, oh, I love Bark at the Moon, and I'm like, I'm just listening. I'm like, I hate that album. I mean, I love Ozzy in that era, but that was such a disappointment for me. But I was like, I wish I liked it as much as you guys did, because I want to like stuff too, And if I have a problem with it and I can't connect with it, there's nothing I can do about it. But you can, and I think that's great. I mean, because there's a lot of things, and we talk about it in the podcast. The version of Children of the Sea is awesome. Love the version of Voodoo, a little extended part. I think that's great. That brings in more of a live feel. It doesn't feel like we're just going through the motions. So there's a lot of things that succeed for me on Live Evil, and there's a lot of things that don't. But I can certainly appreciate it from different
Yeah.
aspect.
Why? Yeah. One thing I do want to mention is once I heard that, what was that other live one they put out um, from the Mob Rules tour when they kind of got
Hammersmith.
back together. What was that one called again?
Well, there was one that was recorded on Mob Rules that was Rhino released. It was a 3-album set called Live at Hammersmith. Is that what it was? Live at Hammersmith, John, or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, live at Hammersmith. That's
yeah,
to me that, I mean, even though Live Evil means a lot to me, that's actually a better live album for a live album, in my opinion, is a Live at
yeah,
Hammersmith.
yeah, yeah. We
The vibe, it just they something about it, it just fluently works better as a live album. I do agree with you looking back on Live Evil that it does seem oddly cut, and I remember the tape. That was terrible what they did on the tape of that, where it just like fades in or something on the
yeah,
second side or fades out. I forget. I had the tape. When we go on tour, I'd play it on tape and just like, what the hell is that? It's like, I think the guitar solo just like kind of ends, and then the tape just ends, and then it goes back on the other side, and it just like, like they didn't even have enough, sense to like make the version of the live tape end properly.
yeah. I mean, it's things like that that I'm like, what were you thinking? And actually, they weren't really. They
Like
weren't
an
really.
8-track or something, problem.
Yeah, yeah. I know, and I think that there was the whole debacle with the band breaking up. I mean, the cracks started to form around Mob Rules, but by the time they started working on this live album, things really started to fall apart. And I think that that's what overshadows. I think that's what the main obstacle was as far as this album reaching a proper state of completion.
Yeah.
There was, the band
I
breaking
mean,
up, splitting in half.
I hate to say it, but I mean, if they were that not into it, they maybe shouldn't have released the darn thing. I mean, either go for it or don't go for it,
Yeah.
like do it with integrity. I mean, how can you release it and just be like, whatever,
Because they just signed a contract with Warner Brothers, that they just renewed the contract. I mean, that was the deal. Like Dio just got signed, and that was another point of contention because Dio, when they renewed the deal, the first release was to be Live Evil, and then they signed Dio to this solo thing. So I mean,
yeah.
they're
Well,
locked in
when
there.
you're doing lots of, we'll say cocaine, I guess, it makes people really paranoid. So, they probably, everyone was probably freaking out,
Well, that was the main thing with I mean, and they talk about it openly. In fact, years later, Tony's actually said, he's like, yeah, I might have been too high. I might have been a little bit, I might have been a little bit too paranoid, but yeah, I mean, so they had different schedules because I mean, if that's your lifestyle, then obviously, you're not an early riser because
You're up all
your
night
sleep
partying.
schedule's a little off. So the
Yeah,
scheduling conflict was with, Ronnie and Vinny were going in during normal working hours, and then Geezer and Tony, who shared the same lifestyle choices, they were going in 12 hours later. And then it's like we talked about in the podcast, but for those that haven't heard it, Ronnie's showing up on time during the day and waits around. And then I was like, all right, well, we're here.
do
Uh,
something.
Bring it up. Let's listen to it. Let's hear it. And then they leave. And then Tony and Geezer come in and they say, well, oh, you just missed Ronnie. Ronnie and Vinny were here. Oh, really? What were they doing? Oh, well, he told me he wanted to hear the vocals. He told me to turn the vocals up. And then all of a sudden it becomes a conspiracy. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
There's probably only a few people that were there. And, there's conflicting stories about what actually happened. But nevertheless, that was a situation. And that was what ultimately took a toll on the finished album, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I think if in some ways if they had
Oh, John, you're still here?
yeah.
I know, right?
If they had maybe taken the Ozzy songs that they had to do, Paranoid, Iron Man, Children of the Grave, War Pigs, maybe made a medley of those just to tick off that box. And then to take an Ozzy era, one or two Ozzy era songs that Ozzy wasn't able to pull off live anymore. Like maybe if they had done Hole in the Sky or Megalomania or A National Acrobat, like sort of a deep, one or two deep cut Ozzy things, and have Dio sing those, I think his voice would have fit those. It would have made the album a little bit more special.
They had to check boxes. You know, a live album, especially the first official Black Sabbath live album, you had to have Iron Man, you had to have Paranoid, you had to have Children of the Grave. I mean,
Yeah, they waited too late.
yeah, unfortunately, but I mean, they couldn't put out a Black Sabbath live album if, you know, somebody picks it up and like sees Under the Sun instead of Children of the Grave. Like, what's going on? No Paranoid?
Yeah, I know, right? Let's do this though. I mean, you know, hypothetically, they should have did the album in the 70s with, you know, all the classics from the 70s, and then just do new songs for each live album and give us like a real treat. I know it doesn't work. It worked with like Kiss on there too, but it never works with bands. They always have to play the you know, the massive hits or whatever, and it just takes away space for anything that could be interesting in the live performance. I mean all bands have that problem, but with Black Sabbath, it gets tough because it's like such a huge chunk of their set is like the mandatories, you know, which is a shame.
I know. The thing about it is, though, that it's like when John and I talked about this when we did the Live Evil podcast. You know, I'm not sitting there with, you know, play Iron Man. I'm not leaving here until you play Iron Man. I mean, I think the band is under the impression that they need to play these songs. I don't think the fans really, you know, I mean, does Kiss really need to play Rock and Roll All Night every time they play? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, let's try it. Try not playing it. See what happens. You know, I mean, Black Sabbath, try leaving the stage and not playing Paranoid. And, you know, the crowd's going to wait around because it's like you mark, well, you know, oh, the show's over when they do the fake encores. Like, oh, it's over. We better get going. No. They haven't played Rock and Roll All Night yet, or they haven't played Paranoid. Oh, okay. And we both brought it up at the same time that there were songs that were dropped. Live Evil was the Mob Rules tour, and there were songs that were played that were dropped. Slipping Away. Yeah. Was Turn Up the Night one of them? Anyway,
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe.
I think it was. Maybe not. I know Slipping Away definitely was. I remember hearing a couple live versions of them with Geezer's. The Geezer's bass break was really cool. Falling Off the Edge of the World was something they played live. There were songs that they could have done Live Evil with all material from Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and I think that for me personally, that would have been great. I mean, I would probably embrace the album a lot more. But again, it's one of those things where, you know, this is our first live album. This is our first official live album. We can't release our first official live album without having Black Sabbath, War Pigs, Children of the Grave, and Paranoid on it, you know.
And I guess they're kind of screwed because they have to do those classic songs, but they don't want to maybe take the old material and do it because they don't want to help prop up Ozzy anymore because of the feud they're having with them. So they kind of had the short end of the stick in the Ozzy Black Sabbath feud at that time of doing a live album, because Ozzy could do the live album with the songs that he sang with the band, and it might be the standard live version if Black Sabbath didn't properly release an album that had those songs on there. But if they like I said, if they released it with Ozzy, then they're promoting Ozzy and make it, you know, that's the last thing they probably want to do at the time. But if they do one that promotes the Dio era, then their fans are going to be pissed off that they're not playing the Ozzy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sucky pickle to be in.
And not only that, but Ozzy wins because Ozzy now he's the sole proprietor of all that material. So it's really an awkward situation for him because, you know, it's like if they and again, it's like it's a new era for Black Sabbath. They have a singer that's distinctly different from their first singer. It's a great, you know, two great albums, and I think that a live album, a double live album with material just culled from those 2 studio albums would have been great. But then again, it's like Ozzy walks away, and now he's the sole proprietor of the classic era of Black Sabbath. You just can't let that happen. And so they didn't, you know. And
Yeah.
you know, what I think is cool is that there are people that really enjoyed it. You know, I mean, I think that there was a conflict. You know, maybe they thought about it, maybe they didn't, but there probably was a conflict at one point to think like, you know, do you think the fans are going to like Ronnie singing the songs that Ozzy sang? And then that's when I come back to, if he maybe tried to deliver them a little bit more in a way that we were used to hearing them, not try to sound like Ozzy, but take the natural course with the way that the songs are phrased. Don't finish a line in a way that it doesn't diminish properly, or at least by properly I mean the way that we're used to hearing it. That's some of the conflict that I have with the way that he sings the songs. It's almost like it's like he aggressively takes it in a different direction, in spite. And you made a good point too. And I think I brought this up that in the podcast, that the songs for Dio, the Ozzy songs, are pretty much beneath him. You know, I mean, what can Dio do with Paranoid? He would never. And it's like if Dio was in the band at the time that these songs were being written, melody lines would have been different, the lyrics would have been different. It would have been a completely different song. So for him to put himself in that situation of singing songs that somebody else wrote, the things that he is always so involved with, had to be a real conflict for him. So he probably didn't enjoy it very much either. But I think he knew that being in the band, you automatically inherited this back catalog of stuff that, like it or not, you know, he had to take on.
I just added to the overall drama.
Yeah.
Of everything, especially if they're having problems already.
Yeah.
And if there had been a proper live album in the 70s, maybe it would have made a difference with how they approached Live Evil, but it is what it is. So,
Right.
All right. Any final thoughts on Live Evil? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I don't know. I think I got to go over here because Scott is in the room now, in our double room. He just came back and he looks like he's blitzed. So, yeah, basically, I mean, for me, coming back, I mean, going to the album backwards, it definitely brought in a different perception and maybe a more understanding perception. But I understand now, you know, how people coming from another, you know, coming from before it up to it could definitely be turned off by it. And I mean, I understand that. I just felt that maybe I mean, you can only go by your own perception. And I know you guys try to look at it from all perspectives, but it just, the importance of the album, I think, is, you know, is really important for people that came to Sabbath from Dio. Then definitely if you came to Sabbath from Ozzy, then you'd have a totally different perspective on the whole thing. And I just wanted to kind of get that across. Plus, like I said, I'm a total Tony Iommi fan. So that, you know, that tone on that album was something that pretty much stuck with me forever. I mean, even to this day, you know, if I can get my guitar to sound like that, I'm like, you know, I'm a happy camper, because that's just like so heavy and full. And it's crazy that it's even one guitar on that album, even though, I mean, it sounds like one guitar, but the heaviness sounds like it could be like, you know, 3 guitars worth of heaviness, especially for what was it, 83 or 84, whenever it came out. I mean, you know, and it was,
oh no, 82
82 it was, yeah. So it was my first time that I was able to listen to Black Sabbath and not just be bummed out that the vocalist sucked. So I'm happy that that album came out, because maybe if it didn't, I might not have appreciated any of the other Sabbath stuff, because it was just such a hard pill to swallow for me here. And maybe I'd be one of those crazy people that thinks that the Speak of the Devil version is the best way to listen to Sabbath, which that would just be terrible, because I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now in music. I'd be playing something really wimpy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's only half of the picture. The vocals are on point, even though they were overdubbed in the studio. But yeah, I mean, and we mentioned this when we did the Speak of the Devil podcast, that it's the guitar tone. It is weird hearing a different guitar player play these songs. I mean, you can't overlook that. It's obvious. I admire
like a pop version of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain heaviness, but it's more of a contemporary heavy. It's not Iommi heavy. It's not
Maybe
that.
it's closer to Headless Cross heavy.
It's an LA heaviness.
Yeah.
Hollywood heavy.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, there's a few years, but yeah, I mean, Speak of the Devil was more of a contemporary LA, Dokken, Van Halen.
Yeah, it sounded more like that.
Guitar, that sort of thing. And then Headless Cross was more of the White Snake 80s, late 80s era. Nothing against that. That stuff's cool too, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I like the old Motley Crue heavy.
Yeah, I mean,
the Devil.
Too Fast for Love. I thought that was kind of punky when I first heard it. But anyway, we didn't get into Born Again, but man, I want to get into Born Again with you. I want to talk about Born Again. I think we'll have a fun time discussing that. So
Born Again, that one's my baby.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that share that.
Possibly be my favorite era. It's really difficult because I love Dio so much, and I love the early stuff so much. But man, Born Again, something about that just hit me. For me, it's the perfect clash of Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. But we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Then.
Because we'll do the podcast.
After I hear you complain about it and make my blood boil when I hear the Into the Void podcast. But it's good though. It inspires me.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it. I mean, I appreciate, a good discussion. I don't like to get to an argument because there's no right or wrong. Everybody has their own.
Yeah. It's all opinions.
Completely subjective. But I'm going to be fair about it. I mean, and when you were talking
tear it
about
apart, it's more fun.
Yeah. When you were talking about Gillan doing the Ozzy songs, yeah, I mean, there's some really good boots out there that have a great sound quality. And you're right. I mean, Gillan
Rock and Roll Doctor was great.
Yeah, that was cool. Supernaut, he did Supernaut too.
Supernaut, yeah, awesome.
So I mean,
those live shows, those live boots from that tour are phenomenal. I love those. I think they're so cool because they mixed in good, really interesting songs. They had a lot of the generics, but they added some cool flavor to it. But I guess we can go into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But basically, Gillan didn't want to do the Dio stuff. He connected more with the Ozzy material. So
I thought his Heaven and Hell was kind of funny. It was good though. I liked it, but you could tell that he was kind of not psyched about it. But I still.
It almost seemed like he was making fun of it. He may have been.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
All right, well, there's a sneak peek of an upcoming Sabbath Sunday episode for you that you can look forward to. So let us know in the comments down below what you guys think of Live Evil. What did you think of it when it came out? How did it age for you? Let us know in the comments down below. I'd like to thank John and, of course, Darren here. And we will see you guys at the next Sabbath Sunday.